How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Winners Club podcast. Now, in today's episode, we're going to be discussing parenting, followed with psychological research. If you are new here, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on bell notifications. That is the best way to stay up to date on the Winners Club content. As well, follow our socials. The link will be down below in the description. And for the audio version of this episode, it'll be down below in the description. And again, we hope you all have a lovely day and a great week. We thank you all for the love and support. Now, let's get into today's episode.
We're live.
All right. So today, I'll just give a brief overview to the audience of what we're discussing. We're going to mainly be talking about parenting, but I'll break it down into the three-step process how we're going to go about discussing it. So, number one, we're going to be talking about factors of child development. Number two, we're going to really talk about the emphasis on parenting and the positives and negatives associated with it. Number three, we're going to be talking about any healthy alternatives for negative parenting methods and skills. So, which one wants to go first?
So what was the first one again? You said
factors of child development. Factors of child development. I could kick us off if y'all want.
Yeah, I'll let you do that because I know you're taking a child development class.
Yeah. So I'm taking a child development class, and a bunch of stuff really stood out to me, primarily in chapters 1 through 4 when we first learned. So when we look at kids, they are kind of like these vulnerable beings. At a young age. They're still figuring out the world. They don't really know what's going on, so they depend on other people to kind of morph their cognition. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's how they create their norms, their surrounding environment, their cultures, these things around them. So according to Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory, we see 5 kind of systems that break down the kind of levels of child development. So number one, that's like we're going to go in a chronological order from the most impactful to the least impactful. So number one, we got the micro system, which consists of family, school, neighborhood, and friends. So in this kind of realm of things, like how would you guys say those things kind of affected you growing up? Well, pretty big, you would say,
huge,
right?
Yeah.
You want me to go first?
Like I'll say it again. So family, school, neighborhood, and friends.
Okay.
Like, how would you guys say that affected you?
Major. I think it affected me majorly just
you want to go
because...
first? All right.
Sure. No, yeah, I was just going to go off of Gibby. Like, it affects you majorly because, one, you're at school all day when you're a kid. You see your parents in the morning, pretty much. At least I did. Then after school, you usually hang out with your friends or do homework. So...
Yeah, no, I mean, you're around these kind of things every day. Yeah, every day. What about you, Miles? Like, how would you say your family, school, neighborhood, and friends really impacted you as a kid?
Oh my God, dude! In such a positive way, in such a big way, because it's like, well, like you guys said before, like you see your parents in the morning, but mainly like your friends at school and like your neighborhood friends. You know, they all like teach you things over time. I know, like when you're a kid, like you look at stuff to see that you're like what your parents do. But once again, you're at school half the time when you're hanging around with your friends. So, I would definitely say, a huge impact on my life. Huge impact on my life in terms of neighborhood stuff and just school and parenting. So,
for sure. For me, I think the biggest thing, or the one that's like very undermined out of that group, is the neighborhood. Like for me, I would play like tag and manhunt a lot with kids in my neighborhood when I was younger, but I was always the oldest in the group, so it kind of taught me at a young age how to look after younger people than me, and I feel like it really helped me become more of a leader in a way. You know what I mean? When you're kind of responsible for other people. Parents trusted me at a young age because I was able to look after their kids, so it helped me a lot. Definitely why I like the points that you guys discussed too about school. Like when you're seeing your friends, it's just like a perfect way to build healthy friendships. You know what I mean? When you're constantly seeing these people and you're all doing the same thing. Same thing with like teammates or whatever in a sport. But the one I really want to talk about is family. Family is the biggest impact in our stages of child development. Parenting, if you have siblings, your sibling relationships, even extended family. Very, very important. If they're providing a negative influence on you, that's going to rub off on you. Same thing with the positive. It's just what happens. It's what you kind of see on a day-to-day basis of how the quote-unquote standard of living is.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about number 2 in this theory of Bronfenbrenner's is the mesosystem, which is the other factors that can affect microsystems. So it's the things that affect the families, the school systems, the neighborhoods. You know, it's not really in our control. The mesosystem is mainly the elements and factors that come into play for those other things that affect you. You know what I mean? So it's like if your mom has a bad day at work, or your dad or whatever, and they come home and they're kind of, you know, upset and they're going to lash out. Well, that's a mesosystematic response.
Okay.
That kind of makes sense. But that one's really not that much important. It's just kind of influences.
Yeah.
So now here we go into the exosystem, and this is where it kind of expands a lot. So in this stage of the systems, we see social welfare, legal services, family, friends, and media. Media is a big one.
Huge factor in today, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could even argue that media is becoming so pivotal now where it could move up to the mesosystem or even microsystem. Yeah. You know what I mean? I mean, look at kids
I'll be honest,
who have
it's probably already there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You could definitely make the argument.
Probably already there, for being honest. Yeah.
Media, Miles, what you were talking about on our freestyle that just got posted today. What's today's date? 24th of March.
23rd.
23rd of March. Are you sure?
No, 24th.
24th. Okay, 24th. We discussed a lot about kind of like standards of living as a man and a woman, whatever, and how you're responsible as a parent. And when there's two parents that are working, children rely now on media to bring them and uplift them, and that's a very toxic thing because I don't really necessarily think all media is good. Majority of it's bad. So I think it's very interesting, though, if, you know, you're relying on media so much. I mean, Bronfenbrenner says that this is the third. This is part of the third stage system, but we can argue that this is number one. Like media is a very, very big thing. That's very scary, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Number 4, we're going to talk about.
I do want to talk about media once you.
Oh, you want to keep going? Okay, go ahead.
No, I wanted to talk about media once you're done naming the 4th thing.
No, there's 5. There's 5 things, but I want you to talk about media.
5. Oh, my bad. Yeah, 5 thing.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So the thing that worries me about media nowadays too is like, so the kids that are obviously younger now, they're addicted to the media, whether that's stuff on Instagram, stuff on Snapchat, stuff on Twitter, etc. When those kids get older, right, they still have the habit of being addicted to media. So guess what? When they have kids, that's all they really know. So it worries me at the fact that this is going to be a continuous cycle of just parents just giving their kids technology in 1st grade. Shit, I didn't get my first phone until middle school. But there's kids, there's like 3-year-olds walking around with iPhones. And it's crazy to me because, you know how bad that can negatively affect you and your family over time? I've seen it. I've seen it so many times. And it's like we talk about, I know we've talked about briefly about depression and anxiety, but in the grand scheme of things, this is kind of the base cause of it. If you think about it, if the kid is so addicted to his phone and used to talking to people behind the phone or doing things behind the phone, when it comes to do stuff in real life, they get anxious or they just don't know what to do because their parents always kept them in a certain bubble where it was like, oh, here's technology, this will help you because I don't know how to do it. So it's almost like it's going to make us stupider in a way in terms of parenting, if you guys get what I'm trying to say. It's like how parents forget how to be parents because technology does it for them. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Nah, I feel you on that. You made some couple key points that I want to talk about real quick. So when you were talking about kind of how kids are kind of just given like tablets and things to distract them, it's almost like it's like the stereotype of an iPad kid, you know what I mean? And an iPad kid is a very obnoxious child who is not really socially interacting with anyone. It has no social awareness either. That's a big part of it. You always see those memes and stuff like that of like a messy, like gross computer screen, and it's like, oh, an iPad kid had this. Well, it's those things are, like I said, the early stages of a child's development. You know what I mean? Those are what he's already he or she is processing as a norm. You know, being messy, being distracted by media. So I mean, like, it's not. I don't think it's going to be a coincidence when 10 years from now you see more video game usage, you see more media usage, obviously, and those are just things that really don't provide as much value. Especially when we're doing it for entertainment, not a purpose. And that's very, very scary. And like what Miles said, I think it is going to make us a bit more, I'm not going to say stupider, but less motivated to chase a purpose when we're kind of just given artificial dopamine releases in our brain. Brett, if you want to talk about media real quick, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was saying it makes us less efficient to contributing to society in today.
For sure.
And also, like me when I was younger, I found myself all the time comparing like my familyhood to other people's families. Like, oh, why does he get to play Xbox for X amount of hours? Why does he get to have this video game all the time? And my mom was like, well, we don't do this in this family. Sort of, she was kind of teaching me, like, don't be a follower, be a leader.
I like that a lot. And my parents are the same way. My dad used to get pissed at me if I was still, I remember when Fortnite was like a huge thing in 2018. We had like this rule in my house. You had to be off at 11 p.m. My dad would come upstairs, check on me and my brother. We'd still be playing at like 11:15. Yeah, that was pretty bad. We got our Xbox taken away for a little while because of that. And I remember, like what you just said, it kind of made me re-trigger thought where I used to be very annoyed when I would compare like me playing to an extent of other people, you know what I mean? Like people who have unlimited exposure.
Yeah. And
I never really understood the concept, but I'm very thankful that my parents did modify my consumption of that kind of stuff because it's very toxic for you. When we look, even on a grander scheme of things, we see when we're now becoming young adults, there's a lot of people around our age group that reminisce on the points in time where it was a simpler time in life where we would play tag with our neighborhood friends, go on bike rides. Yeah. I don't really see that many kids doing that anymore.
I don't know if y'all ever had that, but
what'd you say?
Those like, you know those generators that people have.
I know exactly what you're talking about. You just sit and talk around that.
Meet at the generator, yup.
Yeah. No, but I don't really see.
Bro.
Not for sure, but I don't really see that many kids doing that now. You know, I don't have a statistic.
Too, because that was pure serotonin at that point.
And that's
like there was no technology involved.
Exactly, and when you look back at those friendships and those times of our lives, life was good. You know what I mean? Yeah. It was a positive memory to reflect on. And it had to do a lot with our attitude. So I want to talk about number 4 now is the macro system. And this is mainly just our attitude and culture. So if you guys could do a second and do me a favor, if you can reflect on your attitude and your cultural influence as a child, how would you define it and what was it?
Cultural influence, as in terms of what?
I can go first if you guys want an example. So for me, I feel like when I was younger, I always had a positive outlook because my cultural influence was mainly from my mom, and my mom always helped me kind of pick myself up when I'd fall. Things like that taught me that, I can overcome adversity. It's a part of life. Don't just throw in the white flag when things get hard. My mom was always, always, always hard on me to switch my attitude when I'd let it go. And I did let it go for a little bit. I didn't really have a backbone. I started hoping for a lot of things, not really putting in a lot of effort. And my mom was always consistent with making sure I maintained or regained better attitude. I think that's very important, though, because now we see parents kind of not even wanting to have to parent. They want media to do it for them. So that's kind of what I was getting at with that.
Okay.
So you could even argue media being for number 4. You can argue media being all five now. Yeah, truly.
No, but I'll go ahead and say, a lot from my mom, too. She was always the one sort of pushing me, wanting me to continue challenging myself whenever I felt like, I was going to throw in the white flag or whatever. She just kept pushing me. But another thing, too, my dad taught me pretty young, I gotta take self-accountability for a lot of the stuff, Sure. Stop making sort of all these lame excuses because, such and such, drop the class, or such and such did this poorly on soccer, so I'm gonna blame the coach or whatever. He just told me, no, you got to take self-accountability, reanalyze what you've done wrong, what you've learned, and learn from your mistake. So,
I like that a lot. What about you, Miles?
Yeah, I agree with both of what you guys said in terms of like, having a positive attitude, because that's something I've always had too. I mean, I've gotten influence from both my parents. You know, they both taught me, but in very different ways. My dad was always somebody. You guys know my dad. You know how he's very motivated.
Oh, yeah.
He's kind of like he takes no shit, right? Like my dad has always been he's never sugarcoated shit for me, and I respect him a lot for that, because that helped me grow a mentality as to, you know, I guess never, like, not everything's perfect, you know what I mean? Like, he never was, like, if I did something wrong in, like, a sport, for example, like, he would tell me what I did wrong and tell me to go fix it. Like, there was never, oh, like, no, like, you're the best kid out there, you had a bad day. There was never none of that, bro. I never once heard that in my entire life from my dad. And I
fully agree with you, man.
My
like,
mom
as soon as
made
you
it
said
like me how to...
really, yeah.
What?
No. What you just said about sports, I used to do the same thing. So when I played soccer very competitively, my dad was my club manager. So he was required to go to every game. He was responsible for like collecting payments to pay the ref and stuff like that. He wasn't our coach, but he was like our assistant. And I specifically made sure my dad would come to every soccer game with me, because he always gave me a definitive answer on how I played. After every game, you could ask him this. I would ask him, Dad, rate how I played 1 through 10. And there was times where he would rate me a 4 if I played like a 4. He'd also tell me if I played like a 9.
Yep.
And he always kept it very, very brutally honest. And that allowed for me to kind of grow as a player. And even at the time, I wasn't really aware of the power of the mind. But it definitely strengthened my mindset, you know what I mean? Just hearing the cold truth.
The hard truth.
You kind of need that. So that kind of just made me think of that, but keep going.
Okay. Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's good that, you know, your dad, my dad, Brett, your dad too, you know, they never sugarcoated shit. Like, once again, like, if you played like shit, they were going to tell you played like shit. Now, it was however you took it, that's your problem. But I respect, like, yeah, it might have pissed me off in the time, but, like, I respect them for doing that. But anyways, back to what I was saying before it. So my mom taught me how to, you know, I know we kind of talked about this yesterday, how to be a man, but also know how to love as a man. Not to be emotionless, not to be a man that's kind of just, like, very, just cold inside and just, like, very monotone. Like, to have enthusiasm, be a very bright person. And my mom does that to this day. She continues to, you know, keep me as bright as I am, you know, even through my darkest times. And I'm, you know, I love her for that. And it's good that you have both ways. You have a person, your dad being your dad, that's always going to be brutally honest with you, and then you guys have a loving mom that teaches you how to love. So as much as you guys are getting that direct stuff from your dad, you're still learning how to, I guess, still have a soft side, which is always okay as a man. And that's something we talked about yesterday, I know, but that's kind of my spiel on this. So
I like that. I think that's kind of, when you break down the roles of parenting, I think that's how it should be. When we're younger, we don't really have a backbone at a typical age, so we kind of are more lenient on our mothers. But it's very important as we grow older to very, very much listen and pay attention to the wisdom that our fathers offer us, because they are trying to pave the way for our purpose. Do you know what I mean? And realign us with that if we weren't. So I like that you guys both said that about your dads, because it's the same thing with mine. My dad definitely always made sure that my grades were up to par. If they weren't, I'd hear about it for sure. It's very motivating too, and I'm very thankful for my dad. But for number 5, now this is a big one now, because media does affect this one too. Is the generation and cohort, which are the same thing, people our age.
Yeah.
Those definitely over time impact us. I mean, when we look at people who we grew up with, went to school with, you know what I mean, they may affect us in our later stages of development, like our adolescent years, what we kind of want to follow, you know what I mean, what the status quo is if we choose to, you know, go down that road. So what do you guys want to talk about that about?
Miles, you want to
go first?
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and sort of give like an example. If you're surrounded by, let's say, a bunch of people that just are aggressive, violent, maybe bully people, and you're in that group, it's just gonna, catch right on to you, and you're gonna be seeing this and thinking, oh my God, this is normal to me. So I might be the next one to, pick on somebody or whatnot. Rather, if you're surrounded by other people that, let's say, like to read, like to write, stuff like that, do something productive rather than affecting the society negatively.
For sure. What I want to talk about real quick too is when you just said, if you find yourself in those kinds of roles with those people who bully and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a big step back now and analyze the microsystem, the mesosystem, exo, macro, because at that point too, you're more likely to have been exposed to violent outlashes in your family, neighborhoods, friends, other things like that. You could have gone to a school with a lot of fights, you know. So I don't think it's a coincidence that you find yourself in that position. So it's even harder now as we progress into the chronos system to kind of adapt and realize that I'm going down the wrong path in life, because we've already been exposed now for years and years and years. I mean, when we talk about adolescence, those are young adults, 18, 19, 20. That's what springs to my mind, at least. So if you kind of deem those your norms, you have to first be aware that that's not normal. It's normal to you, but it's not normal to society. And that's what I really wanted to get at, was making sure that people understand that these are all the factors of how we shape up as young individuals, just because you've had specific instances in your micro, meso, exo, macro, and chrono, doesn't mean it's always right. So understanding the right things can help you kind of escape the kind of life that you're living right now.
Yeah.
What about you, Miles, though? How would you say our generation or people our age kind of affect us as young individuals?
How people our age affect young individuals? Is that what you said?
Yeah, people. I should have reworded that better. People who are our age, how do they affect us?
Okay. Oh, okay. So your social influence, basically. I
Pretty
think,
much.
like Brett said before, if you surround people that are violent and are very, belligerent, obviously you're probably going to be somebody that's the same way. At least be involved in it, It's just the wrong way to go down. But if you have somebody, or you surround yourself with people, rather, that have positive habits, that's more likely to make you more of a positive and successful person. But I think it's huge, especially with, your peers, You ever heard, your mom say, like, oh, such and such is going to jump off a bridge, you're going to do it too, you know what I mean? It's like, our friends are obviously probably one of our biggest influences. Maybe not so much now because we've gotten older and we've matured. We still are influenced by our friends, don't get me wrong. Like, you guys inspire me and stuff like that. But especially when we're young, I'd say it's a huge influence. Like, say your friend wants to go do some dumb shit, right? You probably want to do it too. You know why? Because that's your boy. Or, like, even in today's world, some people still do that, which is unfortunate. It sounds like common sense, but some people don't have common sense. So if somebody's boy wants to go do some dumb shit, he's going to say, oh, I'm going to go with you because you're my boy. So I think a huge influence, and that can go down a very, very dark path. Like, this is something my dad could probably talk about, like, for hours, about how, because he works at the jail, and he talks to troubled kids all the time. But half of those kids are good kids, that's the thing. But they just decided to make that one choice with their friend, and they ended up in jail. So, to answer your question, Gibby, I genuinely think probably the biggest impact next to parents, I'd say.
I like that. Even with media too, and implementing with the Chronos system as well, we could see things like kids our age who, I guess, spend a lot of time playing video games and counterproductive activities. We then almost want to follow suit, if we're not paying attention to it. We may also grow up with specific people who we think are on the right path of life, who we can even say like neighbors, friends, family members, whoever who we believe are on the right path, and then all of a sudden we aren't really consciously aware of their actions have changed, not for the better though, and we kind of follow that path, almost kind of like what's the word when you're like being peer pressured, almost peer pressured to follow suit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like the emphasis on role models, you know what I mean? So if you have like if you have an older sibling who does not behave properly as a younger sibling, you may be more likely to follow what they're doing, you know, something like that. But yeah, I definitely do believe though media is, you could argue, number 2 for the most influential factor of child development. But number 1, let's just get right into it. Parenting. Parenting's number 1 without a doubt. The home life that is presented to you as a young child will shape majority of who you are as a person. I believe it's a mother and father's duty to kind of procreate a human being, and give both of their personalities away into that child to help morph that child. It's basically a 2-for-1, you know? Like 2 people come together and make one. And that one person's a significantly better person at heart than the 2 of those people, if that makes sense. Because they're giving away their best qualities to help guide that one person and set them off through life. That's how I view parenting, and that's how it should be. Because parents do provide a strong cultural influence onto their children. Whether or not these principles of living are ethical or not, it will always impact the way of our social life and our social being. So I'm going to talk real quick about Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development. I'm just going to break down kind of our ages of development and how that could be significantly factored. All right. So there's 4 stages. I'll talk real quick about number 1, which is called the sensor motor. And this is from literally newborn, 0 ages to 2 years of life. And this particular part of our child development, this is where we are most required to have nature and nurture very strongly presented to us. So if you're like a 2-year-old and you're already being taught how to be raised on your own, if both your parents working, you have like a babysitter, you don't really have any nurture, and it's going to affect you growing up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, what are some examples that you guys have that from the time you're born till when you're 2 years old, parents might not do for their kids? I would say being absent from their lives. You could even say violence, other kind of like deconstructive behavior. Like, what would you guys say?
I'd say
definitely.
Oh, go ahead.
You want to go first, Brett, or do you want me to go first?
You can go first.
All right. I was going to say definitely violence, chronic alcoholism, anything. All right, put it this way, right? Anything that they think they can get away with in front of the child because the child is a baby. The child doesn't know enough yet to the point where they know it's wrong. So, for example, if, say your parents are in an abusive relationship, right? Kid is from literally the age of just being born to 2, right? The baby doesn't know anything, doesn't know any better. Say the dad comes home, hypothetically, and starts beating on the wife, right, in front of the kid. The kid sees that. He doesn't know that it's wrong, but he sees it. What I was getting at was they think they can get away with things in front of the kid because the kid doesn't know yet. But that kid pays attention because over time it's going to mess with them, and that's how you kind of develop issues growing up. But like you said before, being absent too, because they don't really know. There's nobody guiding them. But still, if you're doing bad stuff in front of your kid, you're badly influencing the kid. Because hypothetically speaking, right, by the age of 2, you're in what, preschool? The kid may not know about certain things.
Well, we have enough cognitive awareness at that point. And real quick, I want to bring up this one point because by 3 months, the baby can already distinguish the mother's voice and the emotion behind it. So, like you're saying, if the dad's beating the mom, the baby can already sense the kind of fight or flight response that's being emotionally stimulated. So the baby's already. This is like really early stages of the brain development as well. So this baby is already kind of being told that that's how the mom should always be sounding. You know, it's terrible. But keep
Right,
going.
exactly, which isn't good. And on top of that, hypothetically speaking, they're at preschool, right? The kid starts beating on other kids because they think it's okay, because they see it at home every day. Just little
For sure,
stuff like
that's-
that, and I think that's where parents really go wrong. That's like the
more into
biggest
the
thing in my
second
opinion,
stage.
but-
For sure, that's more on the second stage, but I definitely agree with what you're saying, how this is kind of like, this is like the buildup of it, you know? Like, if the baby's already being exposed to this, when he now transitions, or he or she transitions into the pre-operational stage, or pre-operational stage, that's kind of the emphasized behavior that's going to be coming out of that. So what would you say, though, real quick?
I'm going to throw up a wild statistic, too, that I found. This is just the number of cases in 2021 of child abuse. But from 2 to 5-year-olds, there's 138,128 cases just from 2021 alone.
Wow.
Disgusting.
And from 1-year-old
That's
and
gross,
younger,
yeah.
there's 127,499 just in the U.S. And there's probably some that haven't
That's
even
sad.
been taken to court, and it's terrible. And I think this is sort of what leads to kids having, you know, depression, anxiety, personality disorders, just being surrounded by this aggressiveness and violence. It's terrible. Especially a big factor, too, is you see, you know, some kids are, you know, maybe don't have a dad, don't have a mom. They don't have those important figures in their life, those role models to sort of to guide them through life. And they can sort of they have to pretty much teach certain skill sets on their own, you know?
For sure. I think we're getting a little bit into pre-operational, but that's okay because it's from 2 to 7 years. So it's kind of just more of a progression. I would
Yeah.
say, especially after like 3 to 4 years is when we really start to make changes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll also throw out another one that kind of violence that children may see at a young age. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men experience domestic violence. So if your mother or father happens to fall in the 1 in 3 or 1 in 4, as a child, it's terrible to see that. And it's only going to render in your mind more as time progresses and you kind of then get into the pre-operational where we see children go to school, you know, start making the origins of friendships and things like that, where that's going to significantly impact the kids' relationships.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about what you said, Brett, about kind of like the anxiety in kids. I think that's a big thing that is very, I mean, I would say it's undiagnosed in most people, but a lot of people do have anxiety in a sense. So according to Stephen Scott, biological indicators of stress such as C-reactive protein show that prenatal anxiety is a significant determinant of later outcomes for children. So basically, Scott stresses that parenting programs are effective in increasing the security of infant children's attachments and reducing conduct issues like antisocial behavior. So basically, when we are young and we're having, I would say, moderate to severe exposure of trauma, we are releasing cortisol, which is a stress hormone, all these other kind of proteins in our brain that go haywire, and we don't really know what to do. So then, for instance, like I'm going to say, if someone's mother is beaten in front of them, and every time the child hears the mom screaming, that protein is being set off, you know? And that's going to happen repeatedly if this is excessively. Or even just screaming and shouting, arguing a lot. There's some parents who just, once they have a kid, realize that they aren't able to have one yet, that they are not responsible enough, and there's a lot of arguing, there's a lot of tension. Some parents kind of just push the kid away when they're fussing, you know? That's the baby's form of communicating, you know? The baby's not comfortable, you need to care for them.
Yeah.
And that's where we talk about kind of the attachment aspect. So if there's parents out there that aren't ready to have kids and then have them, they kind of don't have any emotional attachment to the child at that point. They're kind of inept and they're already regretting their decision of having a kid. Well, how that fair to the child? You know, the child's going to be severely detached from his family or her family. I mean, it's pathetic as a parent to do that to your child. There's going to be a lot of pre-operational issues that follow with that, because if you're not really if you're not close with your family at a young age and you're not exposed to nature and nurture, you're going to be an antisocial person when you kind of grow up. And when we see a lot of parents who are heavily engaged in alcohol consumption or drug usage, most of the time their kids are antisocial, you know?
Yeah.
So now I want to talk about pre-operational, which is 2 to 7 years. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
No, real quick about being antisocial. I just want to touch on something real quick. Now, I just sparked an idea in my head real quick about parents hiding their kids from the outside world. I feel like that's very detrimental to certain kids too, because they don't get exposed enough to certain things. So that way, when they experience these things, they don't know how to handle them. They don't know how to go about it. So they kind of almost like crawl up into a little ball because, once again, their parents have always kept them away from it. So I think that's a big thing too.
For sure. I think that falls more into the pre-operational, and that's exactly what I was about to say. So now when we're growing up, pre-operational stage, we're being exposed to a lot more in our microsystem, you know what I mean? Like our neighborhood influences, our friends that we first make. And those factors will impact you, you know? When you're a kid and say you go to preschool or kindergarten, which is typically before the age of 7, usually it's around like ages 3 to 5. That's when we first get exposed to those things. There's, you know, that's like our first taste of the real world. So we might meet people in that time where we don't get along with them. We don't know how to handle conflict at all, things like that. That's typically how it should go. But if there, obviously, if there's like a parent out there who is very abusive to their child or to their significant other in front of their child, that child's going to have a really hard time understanding that you can't, you know, hit everybody when you get upset and things like that. And that child is going to be labeled as, you know, a troublemaker. Those are the kids that my heart goes out to them because they don't know any better. I mean, you really don't know any better when you're 3 to 5. You just do what's in front of you. And I think it's very annoying when teachers, my mom's a preschool teacher, so she talks to me about this a lot, is when teachers will kind of just label the child as problematic without even understanding the prenatal influences that this child had, and kind of what their parents are even like, you know? Like I always say, like even what I just said like 10 minutes ago, that the parent's job once you have a child is to take your gifts and put it in your child, you know, and realign them to the linear path of life if they're not already on it, you know what I mean? So like it's if you start off really bad at parenting, but it's your job as a parent to get that track figured out, you know, for your kid, because this is what's going to happen when the child is exposed to these new things. But I also think in the pre-operational stage, if the child is able to get along with people and things like that, and things are great, and they've had an excess of nurture, well then that's also bad, because you're also not seeing the world for what it is. You know, you're being painted this picture that everything's all sunshines and rainbows when it may not be. And that's going to come and affect us later, which we'll talk about. Yep. But Miles, was that kind of what you were getting at, you know?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I was thinking too. It's flip-flop, you know? If it's like over-excessively positive or over-excessively negative, both are just as bad in my opinion.
Right, pretty much.
For sure. You got anything to touch about it, or?
I was just going to move on. What do you guys think, to the people out there wondering sort of what's the positive way to go about it? I don't think there is like what's right to do in parenting, what's wrong to do in parenting. Obviously, the wrong being, you know, don't abuse in front of your kids, don't fight in front of your kids, don't abuse the kid. But there's also, I think, effective ways to guide your kid into going to those higher stages in life.
For sure. I wrote down a couple.
Well, I think there's a lot of ways that you can kind of alter your parenting. Now, once again, everybody's parenting style is different. You know, some works in some families, some don't. But in the grand scheme of things, I think, once again, the negative parts of parenting, once again, being abusive family, family where the parents really aren't around, parents that are sheltering their kids from the outside world, I think those are all negative things. And, of course, I mean, I'm pretty sure violence and stuff is pretty self-explanatory, and absence, you know, just obviously, you know, the parents have to be there for the kid more, interact with the kid more. In terms of being, I guess, let's see, sheltering your kid too much, I think a lot of people forget to realize, like, your kid, if you as a parent are scared to take risks, that is going to cause your kid not to take risks, which is very detrimental, because that is going to get you nowhere. It's not going to help you mature. If you open your kid, it's better to open your kid up and expose him or her to more things as, you know, an adolescent, so that way when they get older, they expect these things coming down the pipeline. It's not like it all hits them at once and then they don't know what to do. On top of that, I think being absent plays a role in that too, because it's not necessarily the parents just sheltering them. Sometimes the parents aren't even there, so they don't have anybody to experience these risks with. You know what I mean? So you being an absent parent, now what I get it, like if some people have to work a lot to help support their families, but you know, doing just little things with the kids to try to just get them to know certain things is so big in society, because once again, the last thing you want is for just that it's like a snowball, right? You know how like a snowball keeps rolling and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, the snowball effect. Yeah.
By the time that snowball is, yeah, right, the snowball effect, right? Yeah. It's just gonna keep building and building and building to the point where it just blows up. And then what? Then the kid has nothing to fall back on because they were never taught anything, you know? And that it's really unfortunate, too. And that's where they kind of turn to media, but media always isn't the right influence and all this and all that. But, Gibby, what do you have to say about that? That's really all I have to say.
No, I like that a lot. So I'll get right into, like, healthy alternatives that I believe parents should provide for their children, or at least kind of like setting up the culture in the family. We talked about culture and how that's a big part of the factors of development. So first, I think as a parent, before you even get into anything, I believe that you should really be mindful of creating and developing the proper culture. So I think number one is develop a discipline, develop some sort of thing in your family where it's just the unspoken rule you have to do. It can be dinner always being at this time, always being together. No phone at whatever this time is. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that one, but I'm saying creating kind of some kind of mutually agreed upon contract, you know, rules. This will allow for at least a healthier lifestyle. We, as kids, can be very annoyed by our parents when we have to eat our vegetables and stuff like that, but it's now that we're older, we're starting to realize why our parents were telling us to do that. It's healthy. It also increases our mental health, physical health, and possibilities of success when we're developing these traits at a younger age. As a parent, I would want my child to be best aligned with becoming successful and healthy in all aspects. Then another thing is being a good role model. If you are somebody who is just reckless, can't control your emotions, consumption abuse with anything, you know, it could be media. I mean, if you're a couch potato as a parent, your child's probably going to notice that and think that's fine. Same thing with alcohol consumption or drug use. This is very important though, because we also want to control emotional outbursts as best as possible in front of our young child. You know, I'm saying this in a parent perspective now because I'm trying to connect with parents on how we can change things, you know. I'm not saying I'm a parent. I'm saying you know what I mean. You know what I mean. Whoa.
You're right.
Another one is establishing. Yo, chill. Another thing that we should do as parents is always show effective forms of communication. If you know you're not allowing, I'm going to say this for the wide array of child development stages. If you're not communicating with your kids at an effective rate as a young child, you're probably not gonna be able to do it when you're later in your later years, you know, unless significant changes happen. But kids, when we're growing up, kids have a lot that they keep in that they don't feel comfortable enough to share with their parents. They'll tell their friends, they'll tell even extended family members, neighborhood kids, whatever, because it's a little awkward, you know, sharing some stuff with your parents that you don't really feel comfortable about, you know. For instance, I'll give an example. Like if a kid like a young female or male gets sexually assaulted, they don't really feel comfortable enough to talk to their parents about it first. That's just like something that springs to my mind. So always making sure that the family is first. That's a big one. I also think it's very important to always boost your kids' self-esteem when they do good. I don't think it should always be 24/7. Definitely call out your kid if they're in the wrong. For instance, if they mouth off to a teacher in school, well, your kid's wrong. Especially too if I'll just give an example. Like when I was younger, I was very frustrated with my mom because whenever I'd tell her a story, my mom would never take my side. My mom would always be like, Ryan, well, think of it like this. Ryan, what did you do? Mm-hmm. And it frustrated me as a kid, but now that
my mom was the exact same way, and that used to piss me off, dude.
I know. I used to be like, damn, my mom doesn't even have my back, bro. I was so tight, but it's very, very good because my mom would be the first one to call me out, but also the first one to uplift me when I did something right. Mm-hmm. And having that strengthens your bond between parents and children. It's important to uplift your kid, if they feel like they're chasing things like for good grades and you never compliment them on their nice report card. What's the child like? They don't feel proud. You want to make sure your kid feels proud when they do something right. And then lastly, showing unconditional love. So like what you said, Miles, that as a young man you're able to show love and still have a backbone. You have a mix of both, which is very, very good. Some kids though aren't even like shown unconditional love, so they don't even know how to love, and that's a very big thing. Like if you have a dad who's emotionally absent, they may influence you when you grow up later to not really care to fall in love, to even give love to people in your life. So it's a very important thing. Would you guys agree with what I'm saying?
100%. I mean, from my research that I've done, I looked at an article from UC Davis Health, which they say like positive parenting really sets up the children for success later in life.
For sure.
And even neuroscience has discovered that positive parenting contributes to better functioning in the brain regions associated with emotions and cognitive during their teen years.
For sure.
As well as Harvard scientists found that positive parenting has long-term benefits, including better relationships, mental health, and well-being during adulthood. So it even affects years beyond.
I like that. So now I want to talk about the third. I'm going to go all the way back now to Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development. So now I'm going to twist it a bit. Mm-hmm. During our concrete operational and also formal operational, this is from the concrete's from 7 to 11 years, and then formal is from 12 to adulthood. But I'm going to sum both of them up in one because I would say from the ages of 10 and beyond, we start to really get a good understanding of the world, especially when later when we start to have hormonal changes in our body and stuff like that in our formal operational stages of development. Then a lot comes to fruition from our early childhood years. So this is when we see a lot of people get triggered by things that affected them as kids. Mm-hmm. When those triggers happen, though, that's kind of the deciding moment of, do I either change from what I've seen or do I become what I've seen? And that's a subconscious decision that those people or those kids during that age don't have the awareness to make. So it's very important for parents to act responsibly for their kids during the sensory motor and pre-operational, or else their kid during the concrete operational, formal operational, are doomed. I mean, it's true, I mean, the odds of your kid not becoming what you were as a parent are very slim, and it's very hard. They have to have a lot to go right in their kind of exo, macro, and chrono systems. That means the right influences around you, the right family friends, using media in a good way. It's very hard, But if you can identify that ahead of time, you're going to save a lot of pain for your child and discomfort. So it's very important to do that.
I think a lot of times, too, parents are not really... I feel like during years of teenagehood for, us, at least my parents, were sort of not shunning me, but just keeping their distance because we're going through so much, maturing, we're going through puberty. We got a lot going on.
For sure.
And I found this from another article, but it goes from ages 9 to 18. sort of what parents can do to cope with those years as they're seemed as, the hardest years, because, I believe when you're wicked young, that's when you're like, okay, my parents are the role models, and then you sort of get to a stage where it's like, you distance yourself from your parents.
Yeah, you see your parents kind of like superheroes to then average people.
Yes, yep, exactly. And I'm going to just throw out a couple that sort of stood out to me. Was one of them being encourage self-reflection, I think is a huge factor for, coping with your child, and sort of, always, teaching them self-reflect, teaching them to, even like journaling at a young age, getting to know themselves, becoming self-aware of what they're.
But like self-accountability too, like what you said way before, that's a very important thing.
Huge. And then another one is, this one was kind of funny, choose your battles. Pretty much, like, ask yourself, like, okay, the kid left a dirty dish in the sink, whatever. Am I really does it really matter if I go upstairs and scream at him because he left a, dirty dish? Or am I just going to take care of it? But also, I think if you, let them know, like, hey, next time can you just, calmly greet them with that.
I like that.
Another one says, it's
you gotta realize your kids.
Go ahead.
I was about to say, you gotta realize your kids have emotions too, man. Like,
yeah,
they're
definitely
humans just like you. You gotta treat them like humans, because like you just said, Brett, like, is it really worth me going upstairs to scream at him because he just left his plate in the sink or he left it on the counter? No, because you don't know, like, at the same time, like we spoke about briefly before, like, the kid's not going to tell you everything. Shit, I don't even tell my parents everything. But, like, so you don't know really what's going on realistically, like, outside of your house or even inside, like, something personal with them. So you yelling at them might push them over the edge just a little bit. It just might be, it might take that little thing right there just to kind of set them off. So, once again, like I stated before, like, just treat your kids like they're humans too, because
for sure
we're humans. We all have emotions. So
definitely, I also
even
think
same thing with like kids too. The way they talk to their parents. I know it's kind of like a topic for a different day, but
I got some things to say about that. Let me cut you off right now.
Yeah, I know. Ryan has some things to say about that.
I was horrible bad mouthing my parents growing up. Horrible. And the more as I got older, I realized two things. Number one, I never held myself accountable for my own emotions. And number two, I also reflected on my parents' emotions at the time. My parents were always yelling at each other, saying these things to each other.
Yeah.
So I thought it was, I guess, the norm to speak to my parents like that. And, I had a notorious rep of bad mouthing my parents. Like, a lot of people knew that, and it always made me feel insecure and, I felt a lot of self-anguish because I was like, oh, that's not normal. I thought that was normal. It's not. Clearly.
This is a topic we are going to talk about this.
No, I want to.
No, but like in a sense, it does have an effect on parenting too.
100%, because if you're a parent and you don't know how to control your own emotions in front of your child, like we were talking about before, you're then going to allow your child potentially to feel that is acceptable behavior, especially if there's no discipline. There was really no discipline in my household when I was growing up. Yeah. I could have done whatever I wanted. I could have faced mild punishments if I even did something really bad. Like, for instance, I bad-mouthed a teacher one time because I was bad-mouthing my parents. And my mom was very livid with me.
It carries over, and you don't want to be known as that kid.
Exactly, but I wasn't even that severely punished, and I still did not learn at the time that bad-mouthing my mom or bad-mouthing adults was bad. And I continued to do it to my parents. So I didn't do it to another teacher, but I did it to a teacher nonetheless. And it can carry over, like you said, Miles. But that's something that we can discuss in a lot of other things, is how parents are treated by their kids. Now, with media being exposed so much, we see kids at a young age already being exposed to swears, violent behavior, all these things, where then they become more likely. Yeah, they become more likely to then infiltrate that behavior with their relationship via their parents. Yeah, it's very, very bad. If there's a kid at a young age who's playing Call of Duty and GTA, and then hits their mom all of a sudden when they're mad, there's a little bit of a correlation going on between those two. Something like that. But you can keep going, Brett.
Yeah, no, I just have a couple more. This one kind of stems from the last one I said, but it says tackle your problems in a positive way. I think that goes for both the kid and the parent. Sort of don't get caught up in your emotions, control your emotions, and figure out what's the best way to, tackle this challenge or problem. And then that's when we have another one, share your feelings.
Yeah.
I think
Communication.
it should coexist. Both the child should communicate the feelings to the parent, same with the parent communicating with the child, depending on the situation. Mm-hmm. Then another one, I have a couple that are pretty big. Learn to live with mistakes is a heavy one.
For sure. Don't chase perfection.
Never.
You always undermine what you have going around you when you do that.
And then we got another one that's respect your child's need for privacy. I think is a huge factor now.
I cannot stand when people talk about how their parents take their phones and check it. Things like that. Like, why? Your child's a human being. Let them figure out specific things on their own. Why are you going to check their phone? I mean, there's one thing if your child has like a notorious rep of trying to scam people or things, but you have to also ask yourself as a parent, well, how did I influence that? Like there's a fine line, but exactly. I mean, if you're a parent and you're like just taking their phones randomly to just check, it's very odd.
It's very strange.
Another thing I think of too when you mention that, Ryan, is you know how people say strict parents make sneaky kids.
For sure.
Because they do, in a sense. If you're going to block your kid off from going a certain direction, they're going to find a way to go around that, which isn't a good habit to get into, which is why I'm saying you should really allow your kid to experiment things. Honestly, it's like, okay, if that didn't go right for you, you at least experienced it, and now you know it's not good for you. Obviously, not the obvious stuff, but, with some things. But, I don't really believe in strict parenting. I see why some people do it, but at the same time, I really don't believe in it because, once again, then your kids are sneaky. Then your kids are doing sneaky shit. And then look how that reflects on you as a parent. You know what I mean? You think you're doing the right thing in a sense, but realistically you're not. That's once again, that's keeping them in a enclosed space. Sometimes it gets so bad where they can't even become sneaky. And then the kid just doesn't know how to do shit. But that's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's almost in a sense like a caged animal in a zoo. If the child doesn't really know. If the child is kind of forced to do specific things, and there's a fine line, like I said before, between discipline and just unnecessary control over your child.
Yeah.
There's countless people that I've met over my life who talk to me or have mentioned that their parents are just overly strict. There's a fine line between guiding your kid to have some discipline in their lives, getting good grades, being good at what they are passionate about, and other things like that. But if you're taking their phones all the time, checking through them, seeing how they act, things like that, you're kind of not letting them live life at all.
Yep.
Life is so beautiful because we have our own experiences and perspectives on things that are private to us. Not everybody needs to know everything about us. So it's very aggravating when a parent would do that to their child because it's holding them back in a sense. But another thing I wanted to talk about was how some parents too base their parenting methods off of other parents. That's very toxic.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Just because they parent one way doesn't mean it's right. You know what I mean? There's a guideline of what you can do, like what we've mentioned. That just because this family does it doesn't mean they're perfect. There's a lot that goes on behind closed doors in all families. It's a house. It's under that roof. That roof is only exposed to a few people, mainly those people that live under it.
Yep.
So you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. How are you to say that your parenting method is better or subpar to somebody else's? You have no idea.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think. If you guys have more to say, you can, but I think I'm good.
I quickly.
Go ahead.
I think, going back on the trust thing, probably I would say 50% of the people I talk to, either their parents don't trust them at all, and I see why they don't trust you, obviously because X, Y, Z, but sometimes it's the other 50% people I talk to, they should trust their kid to do whatever, and I've seen that throughout, my childhood and teenage years whatsoever. But I think just building a good line of trust with your child and having that coexist is just such a huge thing. Like, even at a young age, my mom always trusted me because I was honest for, I would say, 90% of the stuff I'd talk to her about. Maybe I lied in the 3 to 5, 7 years, when I was 7 years old, whatever. But growing up, I was always taught that honesty was the best policy, as that saying goes. And another one said, coping with teenage years, encourage a sense of belonging. Let them know they are brought onto this earth for a purpose. They have a purpose to function in society and to positively impact today's society. Don't always shun them when they get a bad grade. Don't always shun them when they do something wrong. Tell them to learn from it.
For sure. Prioritize growth.
Yep.
I think it's good for...
And
I'm gonna
trust.
Go real quick. Yeah, I'm going to go back real quick for trust, like what Miles just mentioned. If you can't trust your child, there was something that went wrong with your parenting skills and methods. Like at a younger age, if you weren't really involved in your child's life during their sensory motor pre-operational stages of their lives, well then, you maybe you could say that you didn't nurture as much, you didn't provide as much nature for your child. Then that child starts to deem things normal to them that aren't normal to you.
Yep.
Therefore, you can't trust your child. Kind of like if your kid steals or something or lies.
Yep.
Well, there's a reason why it's happening. There's always reasons for everything. So my heart goes out to those kids as well that grow up a bit more deviant than others because their parents kind of didn't really help their cases, you know what I mean? And therefore now their parents can't even trust them. They're always feeling like their parents are nagging them and all these other things, and it's just not fun for both parties.
Not at all. And lastly, the last thing I have to say is I feel like this goes for both, is have realistic expectations for your child and for yourself.
For sure.
As a parent, you're always learning. Yeah, everyone makes mistakes, even during parenting. You're not always going to be perfect. There's not this perfection limit of what's the best way to parent. It's just always a learning cycle. So I think having, that realistic expectation for both the kid and also the parent is the only, way, pretty much in reality, to function.
For sure. But yeah, I mean,
Be good to your kids, parents. Be good to your kids.
And as
Vice
kids,
versa.
though, kids, be good to your parents as well, because they're helping to forge your path of life. So be thankful for the path that you're on, and if it's not a great path, you got a lot more life to live, and things are temporary.
Now, we hope you enjoyed today's listen of the new episode. And again, feel free to hit that subscribe button and turn on bell notifications. Again, that is the best way to stay up to date on the Winners Club content. Of course, you can click right here. We just did a whole freestyle talking about masculinity and femininity roles. And as always, we thank you for all the love and support. And until next time.